civil society have not been happy with the bar even before you became his president. They say that since Akufo-Addo became president, the bar has gone quiet. This is not the bar that Sinuti Fafa Kunyehia led. This is not the bar that Peter Ajete led. Vociferous bar. This bar is lame, dark, slant, sleeping because they are in bed with their former Greater Accra president, who is now president of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo. So they can't say anything about anything Akufo-Addo does.
Oh, you cannot read the book of Lamentations at the time of Hebrews. We are
no, say that again.
You cannot read the book of Lamentations in the time of Hebrews. You are comparing two different eras. The activism of the bar in a military, under a military rule is totally different from that under constitutional.
No, even under Rawlings, Mills, they complain.
No, Mills, you see, I don't think so. And I'll explain something to you. I think the peculiar nature of our political history has created that problem. And it's because the PNDC metamorphosed into a political party. And just like maybe corporate takeover, you take over the assets and liabilities. So a lot of times, because of what the bar did during the PNDC era, the political party that became the natural successor of the PNDC seems to have carried that baggage with it. But then, if you look from 2001, we've had President Kufuor, President Mills, President Mahama, and President Akufo-Addo. The criticism started in President Kufuor's time. It didn't start in President...
that the bar has been quiet.
Quiet. It started around that time. And it's sort of carried over. You remember that our former president, Kwame Tete, even had to come out to think. And from that time, I think from Paul Edu Jemfi's time, through Kwame Tete, coming to Nena Megacha, coming down to Tony Folson and Benson, we have had that criticism. But people should understand that. Listen, the bar essentially would have to look at constitutionalism, human rights abuses, and everything. What is topical these days are political questions. If a government...
A fix the country convener is arrested, charges against him don't seem clear, or does the allegation he makes, the bar has nothing to say about that?
No, what I'm trying to say is that if the human rights of an individual is infringed, the bar would clearly come into it.
But he believes that his human rights has been infringed. But he's a member of the bar as well.
Well, he's a lawyer. In his particular case, he said he's not a member of the bar, but that's another.
Oh, he said that? Okay,
yes,
sorry.
But I mean, but the thing is that he's a Ghanaian. Any Ghanaian who, the bar, when it comes to human rights infractions, the bar is for every Ghanaian. But the point for me is this. If somebody is arrested, there are constitutionally guarantees for the processes to follow. If those things are being followed, it's difficult for the bar to come in. So, for example, if somebody is arrested, and 48-hour rule, you are sent to court, you are remanded, and there is no breach of any constitutional provision or any statutory provision, it's difficult for the bar to come.
What about the refusal to grant bail? Is it a discretion of a judge that the bar cannot criticize?
No, the point about bail is, there are rules governing bail. The fundamental provisions are likelihood to abscond. But the point is judicial discretion. And the point is that, for example, if you are arraigned before court and you are refused bail, and you have lawyers, the next one is to go to the next court, the next higher court, and see if the courts, the judges there or the judge there would have a different view of the decision of the court of first instance. So those are things that, if it happens, it's difficult for the bar to come in.
Some journalists said they spoke about First Lady on radio, alleged that she had acquired some property, and they were prosecuted criminally. They thought that should be a civil matter between they and the First Lady.
Yeah, you see, now that's a different matter. Criminalizing speech is something that the bar has been against. And you realize that we had the criminal libel law, but I think that we should look at section 208 all over again.
Yeah, publication falsehoods. Yeah.
And coincidentally, Friday, I was a guest speaker at the Amnesty International conference at Ejuso. And I made the point that for me, I don't believe that we should criminalize speech. But what I'm saying is, as you have it now, Section 208 is in the statute. So the challenge for us is rather to argue, to make case for the repeal of
But the bar has not made that case yet.
Well, the bar has been making the case, I mean, from the days of old, that we should all offenses that impinge on free speech, as we think, because we believe as a bar that the civil remedies is far better, because the problem for me with Section 208 particularly is what amounts to false news.
It's clear, it's quite elaborate. It says that, in your opinion, or you ought to have known within your knowledge, it was false, and then you published it. But then, and it must create panic. That's where some of them go to that. If I say a state official has done something, how does that create panic?
But Paul, why is it that we only prosecute people when they make those allegations against public officials?
Yes, but that's what the civil society is expecting the bar to be saying.
And we've been doing it.
No, they don't think so.
No, you see, Paul, let me give an example. One of the things that people have to understand is that in the days of old, you had one state-owned. And you know the reason why people always heard the bar? Because what happened is that if you listen to those days, the bar's position will be read only for the next item to be the editorial of a state countermanding what the bar had said. But now we have media landscape has changed. We don't control the editorial policies of media houses.
Majority, so, hundreds of them.
I'll give a case in point. When I think it was during the registration of the new electoral register, and the point at that time, now I think Minister for Fisheries and Aquaculture pulled a gun or something. The bar condemned that action. We issued a statement. We monitored. It just sort of died.
Oh, nobody used it.
I'll tell you something. And then after 2019, after our bar conference, we had a request from the leadership of the National Democratic Congress that former President Mahama and other executives of the NDC were meeting stakeholders to discuss matters of national interest so that they put together their manifesto. And in the interaction, that Mr. Folsom was the National Secretary at the time. And in interaction, that accusation came up. And we actually drew their attention. So the day that I was watching the vetting of Ms. Hawa-Kums, I realized that now the minority that had pulled our statement and was questioning her. So the question is, the bar issued the statement and it fizzled out. Recently, when we issued a statement on what the MP from Medina said about political judges, right? Our national PRO...
but that was used.
Yeah, that was used, but our national PRO went out. And one media house specifically accused us, and we pulled out all the statements that we've issued, and they were actually shocked. But the question is, for example, if we issue a statement now, Metro TV decides not to broadcast it, we cannot control it. So the question is, the bar is not kept quiet. But the thing is, people should understand, the topical issues these days are political. For example, let's take the last year. We can look at e-levy and the government's decision to go to the IMF. That has got absolutely nothing to do with the bar.
No, but they don't want the bar to. They want the bar to speak on human rights. Fundamentally, the same thing the bar has been doing, not economics, but the lawyers, the lawyers' big heart for the guaranteeing of human rights in Ghana.
Yes.
And constitutionalism. So the president does something that is unconstitutional. They expect the bar to say something about it.
And that's what the
Parliament does something that is technically legal. The quorum, the numbers of parliamentarians that make a quorum, it ended up in a brawl. Ghana got a bad name. The Bar Association didn't come and say that, as far as the bar is concerned, this is the Constitution. We urge people to go to the Supreme Court, but this is our understanding of the Constitution.
Oh, the matters before the Supreme Court.
It took a while before it got to the Supreme Court.
You see, the matters before the Supreme Court, and I'll show you something. At times, the civil society landscape is such that we don't have the luxury that the others have. For example, let's take our respected CSOs like CDD, IA, IDEG, and all this.
You didn't add Imani, please.
Imani,
Franklin
yes,
is watching the program.
Please, I'll just say
Imani.
Yeah. But the point is that they can comment on any issue.
All around.
All issue. We cannot do that. So, you know, at times you not hear our voice because what is being discussed is topical. For example, do you really expect the bar to make a comment about e-levy? No. And our history is...
No, but I'm talking about constitutional matters. Legal and constitutional matters.
Oh, can you give me an example that we kept quiet? Where there was a blatant infringement of the constitutional provision that the bar kept quiet. You see, one of the things that we have to understand is that the bar is not there to validate anybody's position. You may take a position that something is unconstitutional. The Supreme Court has exclusive jurisdiction in these matters. So maybe your view is that something is unconstitutional, but can anybody point to a blatantly constitutional action by any executive member of executive of any government that the bar kept quiet? Certainly not. We wouldn't. But that for me, it's what people don't get. That we will stick to matters that are within that remit. But I'll give an example. History is a guide. The late Ibukashi was our president between 1998 to 2001. And I think 2001, around April, May, that was the time that President Kufuor's government decided to go HIPIC. There was this headline, the GBA is against the government's decision to go to HIPIC. Anybody who was at our 2001 conference, Sunyani, come and see what he went through. Look, those are decisions that governments are entitled to make. Because the government's decision to go to HIPIC had no...
But as bar president, he criticized it?
Yes, and from that time, it became something that all bar presidents took looked at that example, that listen, matters that governments take, whether popular or unpopular, it's for the electorate to decide. For example, for me, if a government takes a decision that within the parameters of the Constitution, it's legitimate, there's no statutory provision, the government puts itself up for the electorate to make a decision on them. And for me, that is unfair. But you see, one of the things that people should understand is that with the current president, former Greater Accra president, he even wanted to contest in '95 against Samuel Kujeto and Diem-Eduse, and he was prevailed upon to step down because at that time he was going to be the MP for the parliamentary candidate for Boakwa North or Boakwa something. From the days in 2001 when he was Attorney General, he was the first Attorney General to actually pay for the lawyers from the Office of the Attorney General to attend the bar conference. And I'll tell you a story.
To be in good standing.
To be in good standing. And some of us were even very cynical about it. We thought it was a one-off for the simple reason that that was the year that Yaw Boafo and Paulo Addo-Otchere were contested. And those of us supporting Paulo Addo-Otchere felt that, I mean, the rumor was that he was supporting Yaw Boafo, so we felt that it was even some...
Oh, yeah, he was gathering votes for
it has come to stay. He has attended almost every conference, at least the opening ceremony since he became Attorney General, when he was Foreign Minister, as opposition leader. And I think he's ordered every conference. And for me, at every Matthias Day, he's there. I mean, one of the most embarrassing things...
Is that the reason why the bar has a soft spot for the Akufo?
No, that's why people may think so. I'm just trying to explain something to you that, listen, when people should understand what happens, I'll give you one of the embarrassing episodes Tony and I had to go through. In 2020, we organized a virtual Matthias Day, but the in-person was just limited to about 50 or 60 people that reached. And we wrote to the presidency to excuse him. We were there and the president shows up. And was so embarrassed.
Oh, in the COVID, the restrictions?
Yeah, he came to reach
For Matthias Day?
Matthias Day. Even though we had written to the presidency
he shouldn't come.
That year that we were not going to have virtual. He showed up. You know, so the point is that this year's Matthias Day, I hear that we got message because you have
he had traveled or something.
And that the only thing was that he requested that we start at 10 a.m., just an hour. He was there. So for me, Matthias Day, for example, we invite speakers, we invite the president. Every time we extend invitation to all the top members of government. It's for everybody. Anybody can show up to attend. So because maybe he's always at our functions, people may seem to think that...
But he's also it's sort of a bar, he's a proper bar member.
Absolutely.
So then people may be right to suggest that there's so much coziness between the bar and the president, they can't say anything.
No, I'm just saying what coziness, because for me, has the president engaged in any blatant constitutional
infraction? When he selected his ministers, okay, so I get the point. So for instance, when he selected his ministers, the first set of ministers, over 100, civil society was saying that the bar is quiet. But the point you're making is that that's a political decision. Because it's not illegal to have 5,000 ministers. Absolutely. But as soon as he crosses the legal line, the bar will be there to speak.
Absolutely.
So far he hasn't.
For example.
6 years.
For example, the Ghana's ranking on the press freedom.
Yes.
And my Amnesty International, like I said, that it's a matter of consent for everybody that our rank is coming up. But the point is, at times people make these accusations, and I want somebody to pick up on a specific allegation where the current president or any president engaged in something so blatant that the bar kept quiet. But as I said, there's no maximum limit.
The Caleb Kuda issue where he was brutalized by security officials, a journalist who was doing his work surreptitiously anyway, but however he is entitled to the freedom, and the bar is a big bulwark for this narrative. The bar didn't say anything.
Oh, there's a reel of Mr. Forson receiving his petition at the Southern Secretariat.
Oh, I see.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry.
Absolutely.
So I become like President Mahama who didn't know that.
No, you see, that's what I'm saying. That you can, Mr. Forson, I was absent that day, but Mr. Forson and other executives were there to receive the petition in support of the petition. Because we felt that, as a journalist, that was not the way to, even if he had breached security protocols, you don't arrest a journalist in this broad daylight with all, as if he's some armed robber, fugitive from justice. And the petition, the bar supported them. They actually came to our National Secretariat, and my predecessor was there to receive it.
Okay, there's another one. Radio stations were closed down by the NCA, and it was thought to be restricting press freedom by those who were affected. Bar Association didn't say anything because it was Akufo-Addo.
No. The question is, if you don't pay for your license and the NCA decides to exercise its statutory power, what do you do? You know, it may sit on, it's like a seat belt. The law says that wear your seat belt, but most people don't wear it. But when the policeman stops you and asks you, Paul, why not your seat belt and arrest you? Can you say that because most commercial drivers don't put their seat belt on? You see, there's a difficulty is that things may not be expedient, but is it lawful? If it's lawful, the bar's hands are tied. If it's inexpedient, as I'm saying, it's for the government to risk its popularity. But if it's unlawful, then you see the bar. And it's something that we're going to do. But you see, in the days of old, for example, every single day, a public tribunal would issue a verdict. And you had the constitutionally created judiciary. So almost every day, there was some infringement or something unconstitutional. So there was something for our fathers to, you know this Martyrs' Day that we're talking about? If you listen to if you know the history of it, and at least my father was the National Secretary around that time in 82, 85.
Hey,
yes,
I see.
Yes, and Mr. J. Kajima was the president. One day, my father tells some of the stories. At times, it's like watching, it's like, is he really lying? Or so they got even arrested. And until, I think, Justice Aban became Chief Justice, judges were not even attending. That is the era in which the Peter Jetes and the Nuti Fafa Queenings and the J. Kajimites found themselves. Today, Martyrs' Day.
Oh, they were not attending Martyrs' Day?
They were not attending.
They were afraid of...
no.
What?
You know, you have to understand, it was Justice Akwa's time that they erected the bust.
Yes.
It was Justice Aban's time that I think judges started attending officially, and then Justice Akwa's time, he actually collaborated. Because if you really look at it, the Martyrs' Day should even be celebrated by them. But to think that that was the era that our fathers found themselves. Today, Martyrs' Day, everybody shows up. That is the era that we're talking about. So their era was a different era from now. But one thing that we also have to know is that I think in the last 30 years, governments primarily have shown a desire to work within the dictates of the Constitution. It's not perfect, you know. So naturally, the bar's activism thing. But Paul, for me, why do people still expect us to be issuing statements? I think that we're just giving an easy pass. And I'll tell you why. There's a criticism that I always raise up my hand. What we have not done. Any student of constitutional law will realize that in '93, when we ushered in the Fourth Republic, leaders of the bar stopped issuing statements and started going to the Supreme Court. How many GBAs, Attorney General cases do we have?
There are quite a few.
Absolutely. You get the point. So our fathers now realizing that there was a far more potent form of activism resorted to that. Issuing a statement in the revolutionary era was the highest form of activism. But issuing a statement in this era is an easy pass. And I think that bar president are even giving passes by people asking us just to issue.
Let me just announce that we have just 5 minutes to go, but we're going off Metro TV now. We're on social media. If continue listening to Yaw Boafo, I'm terribly enjoying his intelligence. And then we'll take some text messages. 5 more minutes and we'll be done. On social media, Good Evening Ghana Official on Facebook.
But there's something that we've not done enough. Public interest litigation. Let me give you an example. Say a journalist on Metro TV is arrested in the course of his job and maybe is brutalized by the security agencies. The bar has 2 options. The bar issues a statement and goes to sleep. What about if we take up the matter pro bono and actually go to the High Court and get orders made in his favor, in the enforcement of human rights, which will be better? I think that we have not done enough. On that one, I'll raise up my hands. But the point is that if our fathers even realized that the time for change had come and started invoking the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, where they felt that things were not being done right. Why should we go back to that era of issuing statements? I'm not saying issuing statements have no effect, but it doesn't carry the weight that it carried in that era. I think that we should now be looking at legal remedies, constitutional remedies. The Constitution gives us a lot of remedies. There are statutory provisions now. The rules of court now has procedure for the enforcement of human rights, all in our rules. Why don't we help people? And I think that we can achieve far better social justice with that than just issuing statements. For me, the demand that we issue statements, I think it's an easy pass.
Issue statement to condemn. That's what civil society wants.
Yes, issue statement. But what about if we get orders of the court?
That's stronger.
That's
stronger. Bar doesn't do this public interest thing you're talking about.
That is something that I'll raise up mind. That's what I'm saying. That's a far more legitimate criticism of the bar than this issue statement. But at times, there's something about this country. When somebody makes a statement, everybody seems to follow. This thing about the bar has lost this. The bar has lost activism.
It's not verifiable.
What's the empirical evidence? It's just somebody makes that statement and everybody seems to be reciting it. It becomes a worn-out, an old refrain, a worn-out hymn book. The bar, at times people see you and the criticism just sort of, when you ask them, give me specific instances. Where's the empirical evidence? It's unwanted.